African leaders, we get together a couple of times a year. Some of you will know these men. It's Mensa Otabil is one of them. Bishop Micah Kwankwa, Yemi Adefarison, Matthew Ashimaloa has sent a few papers for presentation. Bishop Oyedepo has expressed tremendous interest in that. And basically the key churches, largest churches in Africa, we come together to deal with African problems. What are our problems and how can we address these problems? So the first place we're looking at is now dealing with our system, our governmental system, identifying apostolic fathers as they relate to their sons, as their sons can function competently in ministry, developing the kinds of models that are not just strong churches, but dealing with the 8 issues I mentioned here. These are really important because if we're not going to get assistance from anywhere else, we have to have at least the power and ability to assist ourselves. And so we're seeing, for example, in Tanzania, there's a young man there, he's barely 40 years old, his name is Apostle Mungwira, just a young fellow from the bush, can barely speak English. He has now about 95,000 people just outside Dar es Salaam, bought 56,000 acres. Yemi Adefarison and Mike Akwankwa went out there to go and be with him in October. We couldn't be there. My dad had passed away, so I couldn't be there. And when I got to the information on what this young man was doing in the middle of the bush, in the middle of nowhere, there's 95,000 people. They now have purchased 112,000 hectares of land. They're growing food for export to Europe. They're in husbandry. They're raising cattle. He started a bank. This is how he started his bank. You know, nothing about banking. He just said, the Lord said, I must start a bank. And so he announced it, and a few people in his church that were qualified said, we'll come and help you. Government minister said, you're not starting a bank. And so he prayed and said to the government minister, if you're going to stand in the way of God's gift, you're going to die. And this was Monday. Friday, this government minister died. Now, whether it was his prayer, or whether it was his time, or whether it was both, he died. So now this young man at the age of 40, if he says to government, I want something, he gets it. And so our responsibility now as a group of apostolic leaders to come around this young man and make sure that all the kinds of things in his life have the right kinds of balance, to work with his network, to make sure that he's intact. We make sure that even his teaching, what he teaches, the way he teaches it, is not out there. And it's wonderful to see the kind of teachable spirit he has. But let me show you the kind of character this young man has. Let me show you. Our apostolic summit was hosted by Mensa Otabil in Ghana with the Ghanaian leaders, Archbishop Duncan Williams and that bunch. And so Dr. Price was going to preach in Tanzania for Apostle Mungwira. It was just one of those trips organized within 10 days. And he said to Dr. Price, he said, Dr. Price, he said, I have to go to Ghana to excuse myself from my fathers. I cannot send them an email. I cannot send them a phone call. And traveling in Africa, believe me, traveling in Africa is one nightmare. So we flew from Tanzania to Nairobi to Nigeria, which is a trip on its own. From Nigeria to Ghana, it took him 17 hours to come and speak to us for 30 minutes. Went straight back on the flight that brought him in and went back. Went on his knees, brought an offering, and said, you are my fathers. I want God to bless my work, and I want you to bless me. And when you see that kind of structure and quality, these are the kinds of people that God is entrusting nations to. I'm grateful for what happens in the United States of America. We're grateful for the dynamics of churches and the contributions that have been made. But what we want to see, what I want to see in this nation, what we want to see happening not just in this nation, but in other nations, for the apostolic voices in the country to rise up and begin to speak with the kinds of voice that can deal with these potentates, these spirits that are in control. We have to have the backing of apostolic leaders that stand up line upon line, facing each other, working with each other, developing dialogue, catalog, information pools, gift pools, so that what is developed here as a model can be released in other parts of the world. Let me share this one model with you that I thought was pretty intriguing. I want to share the model in Korea. We spent a few minutes with Dr. Cho, and if you've not been to Korea to be a part of his leadership conference, that's a must. Just put some money together, you have to go there. 100,000 leaders, just leaders, in the Olympic Stadium. And in our conversation, they pointed out several classes of people to us. One of the classes of people were entrepreneurs that God had raised up in that church. In 1960, Dr. Cho identified 14 men and prayed for them and said, God has commanded you to be extremely wealthy. And as a result of that, that church has exploded to now they have over 10,000 legitimate millionaires in that church. It is the most frightening thing to see. They showed me buildings, they showed me companies. I met one man when he was, before he got saved, he was stealing the shoes outside the prayer meetings, because when you pray in Korea, you leave your shoes outside. This guy was stealing all the shoes. And so Dr. Cho went and rebuked him and said, stop stealing the shoes. Well, today, this man is the third largest manufacturer of shoes in Asia. And he's a multi-billionaire. I met another one of his billionaires. He came to Dr. Cho and said, please, I need your help. I can't feed my family. And Dr. Cho gave him $10 and said, do not buy food with this. Go to China and buy a bag of salt, put the salt in newspaper, and then sell the salt in the newspaper on the street. Today, that man is the largest exporter of commodities in Korea. I met a third man who is probably, I think, the most influential. He goes to Dick Bonnell's church. He has a company called Parakletos. His name is Paul Kim. Very significant. He's probably worth $6.5 billion. And every 4G piece of technology that's coming out now has his microchip. Started off just as kids, where today they have a strong impartation in economic power.